Hello there, Ben Bowers, the Spirit Specialist, and I'm here today to talk to you about a brand new release from one of my favourite new distilleries, the White Peak Distillery down in Derbyshire. This is their Necessary Evil finish. This is actually the second Necessary Evil finish. Sounds a bit ominous, doesn't it? Necessary Evil, but there's absolutely nothing evil about this particular bottling. Now, the first Necessary Evil was only available at the distillery, which is a shame because out of everything that Wireworks have done so far, White Peak have done in their Wireworks whiskey range, Necessary Evil first batch was up there with one of my favourites, and to be honest, all of them have been pretty fantastic. So I was really pleased to get an email from Max to say, we're actually going to make some of these available for retailers. Would you like an allocation? I can give you not a lot. Would you like them? And I went, yes, please. Thank you very much, because the first one was absolutely brilliant. So before I tell you what this tastes like, let me give you some background information about the distillery, and then also the collaboration between White Peak and Thornbridge Brewery, which is the reason that this is called the Necessary Evil finish. The White Peak Distillery is based in Ambergate, Derbyshire, 12 miles north of Derby city centre. It was founded by Max and Claire Vaughan in 2016, who were following a dream for years of producing a single malt whisky in Derbyshire, despite no previous experience in the drinks industry. The distillery is sited in a 24-kilometre stretch of the Derwent Valley that was awarded UNESCO World Heritage status in 2001 within the old maintenance and store sheds of the Johnson and Nephew Wireworks that date back to 1876 and lasted for 120 years, which itself was rebuilt from a family-owned iron forge from the early 1800s. Initial spirit releases from White Peak included a range of gins and an agricole rum aged in ex-bourbon barrels, with their first single malt whisky release initially scheduled for launch in November in 2021. However, supply issues with the distinctive bottle that pays homage to the wire and cable produced by the old factory meant the first release was delayed to February 2022. The team employ a longer than average fermentation period and use 2 copper pot stills of 3,000 and 2,100 litres in volume. Water is sourced from the River Derwent immediately adjacent to the distillery, utilising some of the old pumping infrastructure for their condenser cooling system. Only English barley is used, and when I visited a couple of days before the launch of their first release, the team had begun a run of spirit that was using barley taken purely from Derbyshire itself. Thornbridge Brewery is located 18 miles north of the distillery, and White Peak have had a close relationship with the team there, collecting used brewers' yeast on a weekly basis to use in their whisky making process. Necessary Evil is a brand name by the brewery for their award-winning Imperial Stout that's then aged in a variety of cask types. Since starting production, the team at White Peak have taken a number of those casks following disgorgement to then refill with their own single malt whisky to draw out the influences within. The first release of Necessary Evil was launched in 2022 as a distillery-only exclusive bottling, using barrels originally holding bourbon whiskies before being filled with stout. The second release has now been made available to retailers and features a finishing period in Necessary Evil stout barrels that had originally been used to mature Pedro Ximenez Sherries. 2,553 bottles made available to purchase with an ABV of 51.3%. So that's the reason it's called Necessary Evil. Necessary Evil is this release of stout that they do. Now, was it last year or was it early this year? I think it was it was last year. So there is a beer shop just down the road from me called the Hop Cavern. So if you are in the area of my shop and you like really good craft beers and you also want to go in for a drink as well, because you can sit and drink, a place called the Hop Cavern, which is run by a friend of mine called Lee Ruddell. And Ruddell, I don't know. But Lee runs that. And when Necessary Evil came out, it was also around the same time that we had the Filey Bay IPA finish. So we actually ended up doing a beer and whiskey tasting where we looked at the beers that influenced the whiskies that then in turn influenced the beers. So in the terms of Filey Bay, we had the IPA finish. So what we did for the tasting was we did the, the Scarborough Fair IPA that the whiskey then goes into those the Scarborough Fair IPA goes into flagship barrels, which then comes out and is bottled as Barrel Wave IPA. The flagship goes into the barrels that have had the beer into finish, and then that's their IPA finish. And it's the same principle with this. We have the stout barrels from Thornbridge, we have the whiskey going in, and the stout that was in the barrels before the whiskey went back into it is then bottled as the Necessary Evil. So Necessary Evil is this range from Thornbridge where it's essentially sort of cask matured stouts, or cask aged stouts, aged stouts that have gone in a variety of barrels themselves. So with this, we have this PX influenced stout that's then going into barrels that are then being used to finish this. So what I've not been able to get my hands on is the PX stout. Now, when we did this beer whiskey and we actually had as our food pairing, we had crisp sandwiches, premium crisp sandwiches, which went down really well. We had the Necessary Evil stout. So we did their Imperial Stout, then we did the Necessary Evil, then we did the Necessary Evil stout. And it was like 15% and chewy and kind of like drinking Bovril, and it absolutely split the room. It was a meal in a glass. It really was intense stuff, but it influenced the whiskey absolutely brilliantly. And fortunately, I still have a little bit left, because what I'm going to do is, after I've tried the new Necessary Evil, I'm going to have a little bit of this to do a bit of a comparison between the two, because having had a little try of this already, I do think it is quite different to the first release. So let's get this open, because fortunately they are very good at giving retailers a sample to be able to try it, and also allow customers to try it, so that we all know what we're buying. And not enough companies do that. There are far too many companies out there, including some that I've worked for previously, that for whatever reason are incredibly reluctant to give retailers and brand ambassadors, and even the sales team that work for that company, any type of sample stock to be able to try it and go, that's what it tastes like. Now I can talk about it properly. Now I can give it to a customer who can try it and go, oh yes, I like that, I will buy a bottle. And to be honest, you don't need a lot. You don't need to be handing out a lot. We're not asking for full bottles. I mean, that'd be great, but we don't need full bottles. We just need enough to try it ourselves and share with customers, so that they will buy it in turn. So thank you, Max and the team at White Peak Distillery, for continuing to provide a little bit of sample stock so that I can do these videos and I can share with my customers, so that they can buy your bottles with confidence that they know they're going to enjoy it. Rant over, let me talk about the whiskey. So, on the nose, there's a lovely sweetness to it. So we've got this ex-bourbon cask element. We've obviously got this kind of classic style that they've already kind of got this house style of this deep, dark rolling smoke. It's the best way I can describe the smokiness that consistently across the range White Peak have managed to achieve with their Wireworks whiskies. I just picture this rolling, slowly rolling smoke that's low on the floor, that's very, very dark, kind of dark blacky brown color. It's not medicinal. It's kind of like wood smoke that's very low. It's just, I love the smokiness that's come across this. That is there on the nose. But on top of that is this quite sweet sherry feel to it. There's a nuttiness in there too. There's kind of, oh, I feel like I'm going to sneeze. Nope. I breathed in a little bit too hard then. It went right to the back of my nose. There's a little bit of it's not quite raisins. It's more like sultanas. It's like a light dark fruit. Little bit of candy peel in there. There's a really nice fruitiness, and I think that's the PX element that's coming in there. But on the nose, it's quite hard to pick out the stout element. There is a chocolatey feel to it. It's like kind of, fruit and nut chocolate bars, that sort of thing, but more fruits. There's a lot of fruit in it, not that much nuts, and the chocolate is kind of there, as well as this sort of soft smokiness. It's a very complex nose, but there's not what I was expecting there to be from a stout finished Wireworks. But what is there is really bloody good. Right, on the palate. Sweet to start with. That PX element is really quite predominant to start with. And then that comes away, the smoke starts to roll through, and it's more on the back half that stout influence tends to come through. And it's a chocolatey, that chocolate fruit and nut feel. There's more chocolate, there's more nuts in here, but there's still a lot of fruit going on. that chocolate fruit nut element starts to come through in that back, and that kind of that chocolatey, stouty, slightly chewy kind of it's not Christmas cake. It's like a really dark chocolate cake. There's sort of that fudgy character as well. It's much more on the finish. This is surprisingly sweet, but that sweetness works really well with the smokiness that's inherent in their core flavor profile. Very much an after dinner whiskey, almost like a dessert whiskey. This really is on the sweeter side, which surprised me quite a lot. So now let's go back to their first necessary evil, because I don't remember the first one being quite as sweet, and I remember it being more stouty, if that makes sense. But let's do a comparison. See, on the nose, it's drier. So let's make sure we get the right. I'm going to put a little touch more in there because there's not that much left in. I mean, one thing I will say is it's very, very easy to drink. Right, which is quite dangerous at 9:30 in the morning. So, necessary evil 2, necessary evil 1. So on the nose of the first, it's kind of lighter, and there's more element of a beer influence. Whereas the second has much more on there, of almost everything. It's strange, the first really suffers compared to the second because it feels drier, lighter, almost not weaker, but it's lacking something. Whereas if you dive your nose into 2, there's so much going on. There's so much fruit. Stout really comes up now. It's strange. I didn't really pick the stout up when I first tried it on its own, but having gone back to this and then going in again, and this might be one where it actually benefits from literally sitting in the glass for a few seconds, pour it, give it 30 seconds, couple of minutes maybe, and then come back to it. Because now I'm getting much more of that chocolatey stout influence coming through. It really is there on the nose, having presumably just kind of like opened up slightly. And actually, to be fair, I have just poured this. Maybe I needed to shake the bottle or something. I don't know. It's strange how all of a sudden that chocolatey stoutiness has really come through. Yeah, much, much more on the nose. And then on the palate, again, sweetness, but there's more of a stout influence. Bit more of a pepperiness. And I'm wondering if this is just because this is younger stock than that. Maybe that kind of extra year in cask, that sort of thing. You've got older stock in here in the second than you have in the first. Again, it's slightly lighter. There is that slightly drier stout influence. It feels more like a beer influence than specifically stout. And strangely, as I said earlier, I absolutely loved this. And when I tried this first, I thought, oh, this is quite a bit different. The new release, I thought this is quite a bit different to what I thought I remembered from the first. But it's really good, but it's still, it's more youthful. Whereas this, everything in the first batch is dialed up, is like doubled in terms of texture. It feels richer, it feels more complex, it feels better balanced, it feels more chocolatey, more fruity. It is sweeter, it is definitely sweeter, and it may be that it's a little bit too sweet for some people, which is fine, understandable, but I'm really, really glad I tried the two side by side, because it's not that I was disappointed when this turned up and I tried it, but it wasn't what I was expecting it to be. But actually, I've had to readjust my kind of preconceptions over what this was going to be based on my memory, which is potentially somewhat incorrect, because my memory is pretty shocking anyway, on what the first one was. Trying the two side by side actually exemplifies just how brilliant this is. This is really good. Really, really good. Like I say, might be a bit too sweet for some people. That PX element that goes into the stout, I'd love to try the stout. I've got a feeling that the PX Necessary Evil is probably going to be very heavy, but also very sweet, almost like a liqueur type thing. I can imagine it's going to be that. I'll definitely see if I get my hands on it. It's an absolute belter. It really is good. Again, White Peak are knocking it out of the park. Their releases are fantastic. They're doing so well. They're just brilliant. So I don't have many of these. I've already got a couple earmarked for a couple of my regular customers that have said, yes, please can I have one? But if it's still in stock by the time you look on the website, which is www.spiritspecialist.com, you will be able to pick up a bottle for $64.99, which I actually think is cheaper than they were selling it on the website for. It's launched today at the time of recording. You can buy it on their website at 67 quid. But I've got it in at $64.99. So there you go, bargains, much cheapness. It's brilliant. I love it. If you like stout, if you like really good whiskey, it's an absolute no-brainer. Right, that's me done. I shall see you at the next video. Cheers.